Hey, guitar players, it's Sean. I hope you're doing well. I was talking to a good friend of mine, my buddy Steve, really nice guitar player, but he was kind of curious. He's picking my brain a little bit about things like arpeggios and triads, and really just kind of like, how do I take that and kind of apply that to my playing? But he's not really kind of sure what that's all about. And I thought I would do a few videos in a row. It's at least going to be 3, maybe 4-part series here on just talking about chords, triads, branching into arpeggios, and how we can use all that stuff. All right, so kind of the first thing we want to do is, well, just talk about chords in general. Like, what exactly are chords? Because here's the thing, I don't know about you, but myself, when I first started playing guitar, I learned how to play chords just by these shapes. I think it was like my mother's cousin or something that showed me how to, play some of the basic chords. And, I had like 3 chords in the truth, and that's just kind of where I went. And I played a whole bunch of songs from there. But I didn't really know till later when I kind of got curious about how can I go just beyond that. So then myself, I took some time out and I got that really cool Ted Green book talking all about chords and construction, which really kind of blew my mind, but it also expanded, just what I could do with this. So let's take 3 chords that I think probably all of you know. We're going to take the good old G chord, this guy here. We're going to take the C chord and the D chord. And I'm picking those because, well, first of all, we all know them, hopefully, but the G chord uses 6 strings when you play it, right? So it's got 6 notes in it, obviously. The C chord is using 5, right? And the D is using 4. So very simply, it could be said that a chord is nothing more than 2 or more notes kind of played at the same time. Let's take a deep dive and see what makes up the G, the C, and the D chord. All right, so here's our G chord. So what we've got going on here, I'm just going to go from the 6th string through to the 1st string, is note-wise, I've got a G, of course. I've got a B on my 5th string. I've got an open D string. I've got a G. I've got a D. And sometimes you may be playing this one where it's like an open B. I'm going to go for this today, the D, and then G. So G, B, D, G, D, G. Now as for the C chord, 5 strings, 5 notes. We've got C, we've got E, we've got open G, we've got C, and we've got E. Okay, so C, E, G, C, and E. And then our D chord, we've got D, A, D, and an F sharp note. So upon closer inspection, you take a look at that G chord, for example, we've got 3 G notes in it. So technically we've got G, we've got a B, and we've got a D. So it turns out that really it's just 3 notes with a few of them just kind of repeated. And if we look at the C chord, it's kind of the same idea. We've got a couple of C notes, we've got 2 E notes, and we've got 1 G. So again, it's just boiling down to just 3 notes, it would seem. And then our D chord, we've got a couple of D notes, we've got an A, and we've got an F sharp note. So a D, an F sharp, and an A. All right, pretty strange, huh? So these chords that you've been playing all this time, even though you've got 6 strings, 5 strings, or 4 strings being strummed out, they're really just 3 notes with kind of extra stuff put in. Well, not even really extra stuff. It's just kind of duplicate notes to kind of fill them up a little bit. All right, so something that you really, really need to know before we dive a little further into this is I need to talk to you very, very quickly about the way that music is kind of constructed. On our guitar, of course, we have lots and lots of frets and lots of notes and all that kind of great stuff. But if I played a note, for example, like G, okay? So I'm on my 6th string at my 3rd fret. So if I play that G note and I go 1 fret higher to G sharp, in musical terms, the music language for that is I have moved higher by what we call a semitone or a half step. Okay, so anytime I just go by 1 fret, whether I'm going up or down, I'm moving in what we call a half step, like I just said, or a semitone. Now, if I went 2 frets, if I was on my G note, for example, and I went to A at my 5th fret here, I've gone 2 semitones, and we call that a full tone or whole tone. It's also known as a whole step. It kind of depends on who you're talking to. It's all the same thing. And that's going to come in super handy in a few minutes when we take a look at what makes a chord a chord. All right, so we've discovered that there's just 3 notes in each one of these chords. In each one of them, the G, the C, and the D chord, G is what you would refer to as kind of like the primary note, right? Like the G chord is taking its name from the G note. So in music, we refer to that as the root note or the tonic. Personally, I like to use the term root note, but if I accidentally say tonic, just remember it's the exact same thing. So these chords appear to be root notes, like G for example, plus 2 extra notes. Now remember a few minutes ago I was talking about tones and semitones, the intervals. Let's take a look at these notes, and this is where that stuff's gonna come in handy. So check this out. This is a G note right here on my 6th string. One of the other notes in that chord was a B. Now a B, if I just look at it on my string, is right here. And I can see if I just kind of, use that semitone stuff that I was talking about a few seconds ago, you'll notice that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 semitones from the G note to the B note, okay? Or 2 tones, depends on how you want to look at that. So 4 semitones or 2 tones. And then from the B note to D, there's a D right there, we have 1, 2, 3 semitones or 1.5 steps. Now if we take a look at the C chord, here's a C note on my 5th string. We've got an E in that chord. Check it out. From the C, or the root note of the C chord, it's 4 semitones or 2 whole steps, and then to that G, look at that, it's 1.5 steps. Looks familiar. It's kind of like what we just did with the G chord, and because of the construction of the guitar, even the pattern looks exactly the same. And then of course we had the D chord, right? Here's a D note right here, and then it was F sharp, right? That one's got a sharp in it, but check it out. It's still 2 whole steps, and if that was not sharp, if that was regular F, it wouldn't be 2 whole steps. 2 whole steps from the root note to this, and then you guessed it, 1.5 from there to there. So it would appear that these 3 chords, although quite different sounding from each other, all have the same kind of construction to them. So if I just kind of go back to the G chord for a second there, it was just a recap. So we've got the root note G, 2 steps up to the B, 1.5 up to the D, or 3.5 from the root note to the D. Now, these other 2 notes have names. Check it out. If I kind of count up my notes in the musical alphabet from G, we have G, A, B. So B is kind of like 3 notes in the musical alphabet up from G. So that B note is what we refer to as the 3rd. So we've got the root and we've got the 3rd. And then from the 3rd, from that G to that D, G, A, B, C, D, we call that the 5th. So we've got the root note, the 3rd, and the 5th. And from the root to the 3rd is 2 whole steps. From the 3rd to the 5th is 1.5 steps. And that would be the same for each one of those chords. It would be like, so the C is the root note, the E is the 3rd, the G is the 5th. For the D chord, the D is the root note, the F sharp is the 3rd, and the A is the 5th. Now that's only one way of looking at these chords. That's looking at them as if I'm starting from the root note. However, if you know anything about scales, you remember learning the do, re, mi's when you were a kid? Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, that thing. That's what is known as the major scale. And believe it or not, the vast majority of our music is centered around that scale. The melodies that we hear, the solos that we play, the chords that we strum along with are all constructed out of that. And if I go back to G again, if I had a G major scale, I would discover that G is the 1st note of that scale, the B is the 3rd note, and the D is the 5th note of that scale. So check it out. Here's the G major scale, just as an example. That thing, right? So we've got the G, 1st note of the scale. A is my 2nd note of the scale. B, there it is, the 3rd note of the scale. C is my 4th note. D, hey, there it is, right? There's my fifth note of the scale, or my root, my third, and my fifth. And then we've got some other stuff here, the sixth note, the E, the seventh note, the F sharp, and back to G. So pretty cool, huh? So chords that you've been playing all this time, it would appear to just be like three notes kind of jammed together, but there's a very distinct pattern to this. This goes for all major chords, by the way. Even bar chords. If I ripped apart a G major bar chord, I'd have G, D, G, B, D, and a G. Same notes, just kind of rearranged differently. So this is pretty exciting stuff, because when you think about it, when you know what makes a chord, like the G, the B, and the D, you're not stuck just playing these guys, like forever. That means that you can kind of rearrange those notes and come up with what we call different voicings of the same thing, right? So for example, if all I need is like a G, a B, and a D to make a G chord, well, I mean, I got an open G string here, right? I don't know, I got a B here, right? I got a D here. That's another way of playing a G chord. Now that might not be for everybody, it's a bit of a stretch, and of course you can come up with some ridiculously spaced out things that where they might be cool are not practical to play. I want to kind of take a look at just taking these notes and applying them in a very practical way for today. If you're enjoying this content, would you mind liking and subscribing to the channel? That helps me a great deal, and please leave comments. That way I kind of know what's on your mind, if you enjoyed it, if you found it helpful, or you didn't. I want to hear all that stuff. Thanks in advance. All right, well, since we're only dealing with three notes, let's break them down into their smallest form. So I'm going to take the top three strings of the guitar, strings number 1, 2, and 3. So I'll start off with the C chord. So check this out. On my third string, I'm going to place the C note, and then on my second string, I'm going to place the E, or the third, and then the fifth, the G note. And this right here gives me all the stuff I need to play a C chord. All right, now check this out. I'm going to take the C note that was on my third string, and I'm going to place it on my first string. So I'm going to rearrange things here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my E on my third string and my G on my second string, giving me another way to play the exact same notes, just rearranged. And now I'm going to place the C on my second string. I'm going to place my E on the first string and my G here on my third string, giving me another way to play the same stuff. So here they are. So we got the C, another one, and another one. When we play a chord in order like this, in other words, the root note, the third, and then the fifth like this, in musical terms, this organization is what is known as root position. When I do this, I've put the C up on top of the triad, and the other two notes have kind of fallen down, so to speak, in order. In musical terms, this is what's known as a first inversion. And then this, I do it again, inverted again, this is called second inversion. Now because the chords are a pattern, when I go to switch, like to D for example, I'm going to have the same kind of thing going on. Hey, look at that. The D chord that you learned a long time ago is actually a second inversion triad. And this will work for anything. So if I did like A sharp, for example. Same shapes. All right, so that's just on the top three strings of the guitar. We, of course, have 4 groups of consecutive strings here. So in other words, strings that are right beside each other. So my third, second, first string, right? My fourth, third, second string, my fifth, fourth, and third string, and my sixth, fifth, and fourth string. So 4 groups of 3 consecutive strings. Okay, so without kind of spreading this all out and just kind of keeping them close knit together like this, I can take this same kind of concept like this, like we just did, and I can apply that to other consecutive groups of 3 strings on the guitar, right? So check this out. So I'll go back to my C chord again. Here's C, here's E, or my third, and there's G, my fifth. Now, it looks different, but it's in the same order, so it's a root position chord. It looks different because of the tuning of the second string of the guitar, which of course messes everything up, right? So we've got that. So that's root position, but then so is that, just on a different group of strings. And then if I go to first inversion, I've got the C, the G, and the E, like so. And if I do it again, just like those guys, looks like an A chord actually, right? And there. So that's root position, first inversion, second inversion. And of course I can do this again. I can do this on my fifth, fourth, and third string. Check this out. So we got C, E, and G. If I played that up at the octave there, looks like that. That's root position. And then we've got E, G, C, first inversion, and then second inversion. That look familiar? Looks just like an E chord, right? E chord shape. And then of course on my, down here on my sixth, my fifth, and my fourth string, got my C, root position, first inversion, second inversion. So a really great way to get good at this stuff is just pick something. Pick like C, like we were just doing. Actually, let's switch to D for kind of change it up here a little bit. So take your D, play your root position on your top 3 strings. Play your first inversion, play your second inversion, go back to your first, and then your root. And then go to like the next grouping of strings, right? So you've got strings 2, 3, and 4, for example. So you've got your root note, your root position, and your first inversion, your second inversion, right? And then of course onto the fifth string stuff, and then onto the sixth string. Now, of course, I've just been talking about major chords today, but there's a lot. There's a lot to unpack here. So I would practice that up. In the next video, I'm going to talk all about things like minor chords, like what's the difference, like how do we do that, things like suspended chords, like sus2, sus4, diminished and augmented chords as well. So lots coming down the pipe in the next video, but practice that up. I hope that helps, and we'll see you next time. Take care. I'm Sean.